The ground squirrel, whose scientific name is Spermophilis baechi, is California's #1 vertebrate pest. The ground squirrel can be identified by having a smaller tail than the gray squirrel, having brown fluffy hair, and being low to the ground. The ground squirrel belongs to the kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, class Mammalia, order Rodentia, family Squirrelidae. Mammals are recognized for having 4 limbs, which are adapted for movement, and having well-developed brains, which makes trapping difficult. Basic biology. Ground squirrels are omnivorous and enjoy feeding on seeds, nuts, fruit, insects, birds, eggs. Ground squirrels mate in early spring, depending on location, and produce 1 litter per year, which is between 6 to 8 young ground squirrels. The gestation period takes 30 days and weaning takes 55 days. The maturing process takes 7 to 8 months. The average age of ground squirrels is 1 to 2 years, but they can live for 4 to 5 years. Habitat. Ground squirrels prefer temperate climates and can be found in many parts of the western United States, including California, Oregon, Washington, and Nevada. Outside of the United States, ground squirrels can be found in the northern part of Baja, Mexico. Because ground squirrels are a burrowing animal, they require loose soil in order to create their habitats and are most commonly found in large open areas. Ground squirrel burrows may reach several feet underground and can have up to 20 entrances. In squirrel colonies, there will often be an entrance for each different squirrel. Due to their adaptability, ground squirrels can be found in a broad range of habitat regions, including both urban and agricultural regions. Some examples of habitats suitable for ground squirrels include ag fields, pastures, forests, mountains, public parks, and golf courses. Ground squirrels will also go through a period of estivation. This involves the squirrel plugging the burrow from the inside and remaining dormant during the hottest portion of the year. The ground squirrel breeding season is dependent on the altitude and temperature of their location, but generally is highest from March to June. During breeding season, either males or females may approach a new mate. However, males are usually more aggressive than females. Behavior. Ground squirrels can either live alone or with a small number of other families. They are not considered to be highly territorial. However, they will generally stay close to their burrows in case they need to escape predators. Ground squirrels communicate with one another using sounds, signals, and scent. When a predator is spotted, a ground squirrel will let out an alarm call that can last for multiple minutes. Other squirrels that hear this call can let out a response call. If a ground squirrel needs to find a new location to burrow, they have been known to travel up to 5 miles. Ground squirrels make use of their large cheeks to store food while foraging above ground. This allows them to bring home much more food to store in their burrow. Adult ground squirrels are capable of hibernation during the winter. Juvenile ground squirrels do not have the ability to hibernate and continue to forage above ground during the winter due to their lack of fat reserves. Signs. How to identify ground squirrels. Ground squirrels' burrows are about 4 inches in diameter, although older burrow entrances can occasionally be quite larger. The length of burrow systems often ranges between 5 and 30 feet. Most burrow systems are within 2 to 3 feet of the surface of the ground, but they may occasionally reach up to 6 foot or even further in depth. Burrows can be single tunnels or complex branching systems. They may be occupied by a single squirrel or occupied by many. Ground squirrel scat, or feces, is often easy to spot near burrow entrances. It varies in size and shape depending on the moisture content of the ground squirrel's diet. High moisture content often results in a soft, twisted scat with tapered ends. Moist scat can also be clumped together. In areas where the moisture content of the diet is lower, scats are similar to deer pellets. They are often pointed at one end and have a dimple at the other end. California ground squirrel feces are about 0.16 to 0.3 inches in diameter and 0.24 to 0.75 inches in length.
The most reasonable approaches include baiting and shooting, largely dependent on the season. The management action needed for California ground squirrels depends on their activity pattern and feeding preferences during the time of year. Adult squirrels are active from late January through October. Juvenile activity peaks from April through October, possibly beginning in March if frigid conditions are absent. The location of the burrows and the number of ground squirrels present must also be considered. Baiting is preferred for the duration of time prior to harvest. There are two main reasons for this preferred method. The first, California ground squirrels feed largely on green vegetation and pose a threat to nearly all crops. California ground squirrels will be less likely to take toxic baits if they are still feeding on green material. Reducing the population prior to harvest season helps minimize potential profit loss. The second reason that baiting is done prior to harvest is that food safety laws prohibit the use of baits and baiting stations during the time of harvest. When applying bait, it is important to check daily for ground squirrel carcasses. With anticoagulant baits, non-target wildlife may be at risk of secondary toxicity if they consume the poisoned squirrels. California ground squirrels are considered a non-game animal, meaning that they can be taken at any time when posing a threat. During harvest season, the most common method of control is done by shooting squirrels which are visible. One must note that they must be taken with non-lead ammunition. For any method, collect dead rodents and dispose of them by deep burial or by placing the carcass in a double plastic bag and placing it in a closed, secure trash container. To effectively manage California ground squirrels, one must first approximate the number of ground squirrels present and record both the location and number of burrows. After management tactics have been implemented, changes in the general number of ground squirrels can be used to determine the effectiveness of the management plan. It is important to document all application dates and locations, especially when incorporating multiple approaches. It is also important to remember that the removal of animals at a rate greater than the intrinsic rate of increase will cause the population density to decline over time. Each management plan should take into account variables such as cost of materials, labor, risks to non-targets, and the potential restrictions in the county.
According to the UCIPM website, ground squirrel damage can occur in various food-bearing and ornamental plants. Their damage can be reflected directly onto the commodity or indirectly. They feed on green forage, seeds, and grains, as well as fruits, but are all dependent on resource availability and seasonality, which can influence management options. Not only do they impact the commodity itself, but costs add up due to damage to irrigation systems, equipment, and land. According to the County of San Luis Obispo's Department of Agriculture Weights and Measures, ground squirrel burrows, if there is a substantial problem, can cause erosion problems from extensive root damage or the system's complexity. Squirrel damage can also be substantial on infrastructure. This can occur in all recreational, urban, and industrial areas. Whether it be in the landscape, roads and patios, or building foundations, burrows can be detrimental and cause unevenness to areas, leading to structural damage due to stability of the ground being compromised. A study from the Western Farm Press estimates that California ground squirrel damage accounts for $30 million to $50 million in agricultural and other damages per year, even if proper management techniques are already in place. According to the ground squirrel's best management practices, management should consider several factors. Growers and individuals seeking control should evaluate site-specific variables and the time of year. Things to consider are the season, environmental factors, surrounding areas, risk for non-targets, control, labor, and the stages of their life cycle occurring. Types of management options include fumigation, toxic baits, trapping, shooting, burrow and habit modification, and biological control. Fumigation. This is the only option feasible during times when soil moisture is sufficient in order to contain gases, since dry soils are very porous. Types of fumigants include aluminum phosphide, gas cartridges, and carbon monoxide, but each has their own requirements and restrictions for application.